Well, hello, friends. Welcome to Stamp Chat on this premiere of Stamp Stories. We're going to watch the participant number go up and up and up and up and up. Before we get started, everybody make yourself comfortable, have a cup of coffee, do some wrist exercises, keep those stamp hands nice and pliable. And happy Friday to each and every one of you. Just a few more moments and then we'll get started. You know, now's a great time if you're waiting around. Oh, there's Casey Jo getting her Philatelic PT in, absolutely. If you are not a member, well, I suggest that you become one because now's a great time to become an APS member. Why? Because you can be entered into winning a lifetime membership of the APS during our 2020 challenge. And if you're already a member, you know how much we appreciate that. So why don't you get somebody else to join us? You know the benefits, therapeutic, educational. Boy, I would love to see our brains, just how big they are. So espouse the benefits with friends. It's a way of showing that you care. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get started with this premiere of APS Stamp Chat, Stamp Stories. We're so pleased to be able to celebrate with 9 great philatelists who have joined us. They come from a myriad of backgrounds. We'll get there. I'll let them speak for themselves, but today's Stamp Chat is sponsored by the APS Membership Department. This year we launched the 2020 challenge. Our goal is to share the hobby with over 2,000 new APS members. This ambitious goal requires all of us to accomplish it. We're so serious. We're offering a lifetime membership to 3 lucky individuals as an incentive and as a thank you. APS members are our best recruiters. You know exactly why membership in the American Philatelic Society is important, and the great feeling of being a part of 134 years of fellowship in the hobby. Whether you're a beginning collector or have collected for years, we welcome you to join the APS, the American Philatelic Society, and discover the many benefits of membership. Go to stamps.org/join now. Before we begin, we have a few housekeeping items to take care of. Today's session is a webinar, and as such, all audio and video of attendees will be muted and turned off respectively throughout the presentation. However, please feel free to use the chat box liberally as much as you like and use the Q&A box for questions. This session is being recorded and will be made available on the APS YouTube channel. Friends, if we don't get a chance to answer your question because we do have 9 philatelists on board, I will take note, or you can send your question to Heidi@stamps.org and I will forward your inquiry, your thought, your question over to our panelists. You can also be sure to use the comment box on the APS YouTube channel, like and subscribe, be notified when this stamp story is uploaded. So as I said, we had 9 philatelists on board and we're so excited to hear every one of their stamp stories. We are going to go in alphabetical order today, and I'll just give a very brief intro and let that philatelist tell her or his story. Our first guest is Hamid Amir. I found Hamid on Twitter and he joins us from Canada. Hamid, thank you so much for joining us. Why don't you go ahead and tell us your stamp story?
Sure, well, thanks for having me. So I'm really new to the hobby. I joined probably 17 weeks ago, so probably a lot newer than most of you. How it all started is basically I was doing some late night browsing on Twitter. I was kind of in lockdown, kind of bored. Ended up finding a post of someone who posted this package I got in the mail. And the quote on the package was, "I think someone stole my grandpa's stamps collection to send this." And it was just littered with a bunch of stamps. It looked really cool. And at that moment, I was kind of like, okay, I want to start sending packages like this because this is awesome. This looks really cool. Prior to that, I had no desire to look at stamps, or I didn't know anything about the hobby. So that one post alone got me interested into the hobby itself. So about 5 minutes later, I hopped on eBay. I was willing to spend like $40, $50 just to buy a bunch of those stamps, just to mail them out. and they turned out to be, I think it was $4 for 100 of them. So that was kind of a moment that clicked to me, saying, wow, I get all these cool art pieces for a really cheap price, and then I could share them by sending mail. The only problem with that is that, I mean, as a millennial, I'm so used to instant gratification. I order something on Amazon, it comes the next day. When you order stamps off eBay, it's going to take 2 or 3 weeks. So between that time, I just consumed a lot of data. So I watched a bunch of YouTube videos. I caught some of like Exploring Stamps. I caught TED Talks. Michael and Charles's videos weren't around at that time, but I probably would have caught those too. I am now. But yeah, I just consumed a bunch of different videos on stamp collecting and philately, and it really appealed to me. Also, while I was waiting, I went to a thrift shop to see if they had any stamps, and I ended up finding a really cool, I think it was called an Aristocrat stamp book. And that's when I really got interested into the world stamps. So I was kind of browsing through it. I saw a bunch of World War II stamps, and I was like, wow, I pretty much own like World War II propaganda now. So that was the second kind of clicker that got me very interested. And eventually from there, it just grew. I mean, stamps are really readily available online. Another thing that really caught me into the hobby is after watching Exploring Stamps, I went and looked up Graham Beck's Twitter, went on there, followed him, and then I followed, I think you pronounce it Philatelic, but he had a stamp contest, and I started entering those. So I mean, from there, my Twitter kind of just became like a stamp Twitter, which was kind of fun. So now I have a Twitter, you may have seen me, it's HA_12346. And yeah, I just like the hobby. I like sharing things I send and things I get, and I like seeing what all of you guys get. Just looking at different pages on Twitter, I get a whole bunch of ideas. I mean, it makes me spend a bunch of money because I see something cool and then I buy it. But yeah, it's a really good community, and the APS seems to be doing really good things. And there's a lot of content being uploaded to YouTube and the internet now for younger, newer philatelists. So I think that's a good thing. I think promoting the hobby through all these social media venues and YouTube is a really good thing. But yeah, that's my story. It's pretty short. I mean, I'm 17 weeks in. Maybe check with me in another 2 or 3 years and see where I'm at.
Well, thank you so much. And it's please, I do definitely want to check into, you know, what you have to say, because as you may have heard, you know, philately ebbs and flows, and it's been kind of a tough nut to crack to imagine how to attract younger people, you know, who may not necessarily even be into collecting or membership organizations. So you'll provide really great intel, and we appreciate that. And we're so happy that you found, you know, you're learning the benefits of delayed gratification.
Yeah, definitely.
Of course, you can visit stampstore.org, where we send it overnight. So
even to Canada? That's impressive.
Absolutely. Sure.
Okay.
It's next day delivery. So
Yeah.
have a look at stampstore.org. That's APS. Thanks so much, Hamid. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your story, and to our friends up in Canada who are APS members. Next on deck is Mr. Terry Ayman. He joins us. He's been a Stamp Chat presenter before. I ran into Mr. Ayman on Twitter. He does stamp art, really beautiful work with stamps. So, you know, that's what these stamp stories are about, are showing you the kaleidoscope of philatelic entry points. And so without further ado, Terry, take it away. Tell us your stamp story.
Yeah, thank you, Heidi. Thanks for the opportunity. Hello, everybody. Yeah, my name is Terry Ayman, and I actually got started with stamps a long time ago. My grandfather was a stamp collector, and he gave my sister, who's a couple years older than me, he gave her a John F. Kennedy World Stamp album. And so she had it, and she didn't really do anything. And I was about 11 years old, and I found that album. And so I asked her about it, and she said, well, yeah, Grandpa's got stamps or whatever. And so I started filling that album. And then at the same time, I actually started working. I had 2 part-time jobs at 11 years old. And by the time I got to 8th grade, I was making so much money, I got a checking account. So I had a checking account. And so I'd go to stamp shows and I'd buy expensive stamps, and I'd pull out my checkbook, and the dealers would be like, "What is this? Who is this guy?" But then I learned so much about it. By the time I started high school, I started working in a stamp store. And so I worked there for 4 years through high school, and a little bit off and on throughout the years. And working in a stamp store, you just see incredible collections come and go. It's amazing. Then later on, when I went to graduate school, I worked at another stamp store for several years. And again, one of the challenging things about working in a stamp store are the collections that come in, and you just look at them and slather over, but they got to go out the door. Once they come in, they got to go out. So, that journey now, I'll admit I've been a collector now for 50 years, which I can't even believe it, but 50 years. And along the way, I like to do art. And so I thought, well, we got another way to promote stamps is to put it on to do art. And so, and if you can see behind me, I've got a piece that's almost done. I'll see if I can pull it up here a little bit. This is Franklin Roosevelt and Eleanor Roosevelt stamps. And if you see right in the middle, there's a cartoon. Back in the day, I did cartoons for Global Stamp News, stamp cartoons, whatever. So this piece is almost done. I just got to sit down. I've got the stamps. I just got to sit down and do it. And so I like to do stamp art. I've got probably at least 20 pieces like that. And then I started putting them on model cars. I started putting stamps on model cars and building those. And then instead of painting them, using stamps or whatever. So it's a good way to introduce the hobby to other people. And so yeah, right now where I live, there's actually a retail dealer, and we've become good friends over the years. And it's just incredible the things that come in, and that he gives me first opportunity at, and he sells them to him at just an incredible price. And so I have too many stamps. But yeah, that's my story.
When did you make the jump over into stamp art? What was the impetus?
Yeah, probably about, I would say probably 15 years ago. And I just like to do art. So I do drawing and painting. I thought there's got to be a way to combine these two. How can I combine this? And so that was really the start. The first piece I did actually took me 6 years to do, because I wanted very specific stamps for that. And right now they usually take 2 to 3 years, just because I work on a couple of them at the same time. And so yeah, that's been good. It introduces a lot of people that don't really know anything about stamps or stamp collecting. It's a good introduction and a good talk piece.
Well, we thank you for that. Scott English, our executive director, has on several occasions, and I love this phrase, there are many doors to the hobby. And so stamp art is certainly one of those doors. And we really appreciate that you're opening the door to the hobby through your art. It can introduce artists to use stamps as their medium, and sculptors and whatnot. I don't know if you have one of those cars near you or not.
No, actually I don't. They're kind of far away.
I love those.
Yeah.
They really are exquisite. Well, thanks so much, Terry.
All right, thank you, Heidi.
Yeah. If you have questions and we have time, feel free to ask them. Thank you so much. Our next guest is a YPLF, and that means the Young Philatelic Leadership program that we have here at APS, where it's basically a mentoring program for teens, young adults, and each year we have a few fellows. And our next guest is one of them. This is Michael Cortese. You might have seen him on his new podcast, Conversations with Philatelists. He's here joining us from New Hampshire. There you go. So, Michael, why don't you go ahead and tell us how you got into stamps? Would love to hear your story.
Sweet, yeah, thanks. Like Terry and like a lot of other long-term collectors in the hobby, my start came with a direct influence from a direct relative. My father, he and his father had collected for many years before that. He started becoming a collector at 8 years old, and had a number of businesses up until then. Up until he started his stamp dealership, essentially. They came to America in 1992, and then once they arrived in Massachusetts, my father, being a collector since he was 8 years old, started buying locally and selling privately to clients or sending to auction houses. Then eBay came around in 1998, and that's where I kind of started. Being 8 years old, he brought me in at the same time as him, would put me right next to him and sit me down and show me how to use the Scott catalog. He would have me help him find stamps that he couldn't find, or items that he was unable to, if you will, kind of teaching me the thrill for the hunt intrinsically. After, as I grew older, he would bring me into his business more so with every passing year. Middle school, high school, college. After school, I'd start photographing stamps, picking apart collections that he brought together, bought from other people as well. And then as I was even older still, probably 12 or 13, was when the first time he started taking me to collections to buy with him, which is really what put my roots in the hobby, was watching him purchase material or pick up consignments from other people. So the story I kind of wanted to tell was the thing that got me most excited about the hobby. So we would take these trips down to New Jersey all the time. There was a British Commonwealth dealer. I don't think he had a shop or anything like that. He just had a client base, and would sell through mail order catalog and stuff like that. So he would buy privately himself, and then he would sell off his remaindered material to us. On probably our 7th or 8th trip down there, we got to know him very well. I would think I was 14 at the time. We walked through his door, had the appointment, and on the kitchen table is sitting the stamp collection that he presented to sell for us. It's just 40 hingeless Lindner albums, mint British Commonwealth material. It was what we were used to buying from him. And usually what would happen is my father would walk in and he'd look at the collection for about half an hour, 45 minutes, and then tell the guy, okay, this is what I can offer. The guy would negotiate with him, and we'd walk away with the collection. So the guy stops us as we get through the door and says, I want to do things a little differently this time. You've brought your son here 7 or 8 times now. I've got a number in my pocket on a piece of paper. He said, your son watches over you while you attribute the collection. You look at everything. You say he's been with you in the business for, I think, 6 years at the time. He said, why don't you let the kid price the material? So he sat down with my dad on a separate table, just had a cup of coffee, shared stories about collections they purchased and sold, while I spent an hour and a half looking through these 40 Lindner albums at age 14 years old, and had to write down on a piece of paper what I thought we should buy. The guy had said, the piece of paper in my pocket, if he comes within $2,000 on either end, I'll let you guys take it. No negotiation. This is my bottom price. I know what I paid for this. And usually there wasn't a lot of negotiating with this guy. So my dad kind of just agreed to that. After about an hour and a half, I wrote down on the piece of paper what I thought it was worth. I wrote $27,500, put it on the table next to them. And the guy kind of laughs. He pulls the piece of paper out of his pocket. It says $29,000. So I hit the mark. And that was kind of the most... There's been more exciting times in my philatelic history since then, but that was the thing that caught me the most. It was the excitement of this guy who's been in the business his entire life, and British Commonwealth material isn't too hard as long as it's kind of the common stuff. I didn't take anything out or watermark it or put it up to a perf gauge or anything like that. But he had everything attributed catalog value and everything like that, so it was a little easier for me. But the fact that I could kind of talk on par with someone who'd been in the business this long and everything like that really hooked me. My father, of course, looked through the collection himself after. He didn't just take my word on it and then take the guy's word on it. But he looked through the collection after and agreed that, yeah, okay, 2750 is what we'll do, and we walked away with it. And then from then on, I was pretty much hooked. Going to buy collections or going to talk to people who I wouldn't meet elsewhere because they don't go to shows or they've just inherited this collection or anything like that. It's a kind of connection that I don't usually get to make, and it's unfortunately we only get to see these people once. But sometimes what happens is while teaching them about the stamps, they decide to keep half the collection, which is great for the hobby, not so great for us. But they decide they want to take part in the hobby, and they keep a part of this collection they've inherited and become collectors. And that was when I really knew that I wanted to do this full time forever at age 14. And it was all just because this guy wanted to have a little fun. Yeah. From then on, at age 22, I joined the YPLF. I feel like I should just plug that. But Alex Ayman was terrific in bringing me out of we'd only ever been on eBay, and I'd only ever met people to buy individual collections from. So he was terrific in bringing me out of the kind of the solitary nature of the eBay stamp dealer business and inviting me to stamp shows. My first stamp show in Milwaukee in 2013. That's when I first became an APS member. And yeah, ever since then, I've been a little more active each year. Socially, that is. Yeah, that's the story I was going to share.
That is, I think we were all transfixed and rapt with attention to imagine little you at 14. I mean, that's right out of a movie scene. That is such a thrill. It must have been such a thrill for you.
I won't say I wasn't nervous.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And was the guy starstruck? Was he just like, he sounds like he could have been really confident in you.
Yeah, I mean, I'd been there 7 or 8, I don't remember how many, 7 or 8 times by then, and we'd spend 2-3 hours at a time. We'd buy the collection in an hour, but then just spend time chatting with them, and I'd just try and soak up as much information about the hobby, about the people, about the stamps as possible. So I feel like he must have been somewhat confident in my ability to do it. Otherwise, it would have just wasted everyone's time.
Now, have you met, as you were a young person, did you know any other, stamp kids or?
No, that's why at age 22, I literally just typed into Google young stamp collectors. YPLF popped up, and Alex was incredible in just accepting the invitation and bringing me into the hobby, and that's why I'm an APS member, because of Alex and the YPLF, and that's why I'm here.
Well, thank you so much. Each story is just so unique, so many different doors to the hobby. Thank you.
Yeah,
We're going to move beautifully, over to your partner in crime, who also co-hosts Conversation with Philatelists and is a YPLF graduate himself, Charles Epting. You're in the hot seat now. Let's hear your stamp story.
Thank you very much for inviting me on, Heidi. I think I'm probably in the minority when it comes to APS members. I didn't collect as a kid. I didn't have any family members who collected as a kid. I had no one sort of holding my hand. I collected basically everything but postage stamps growing up. So whether it was fossils or books or dinosaur toys or any. It was just, I loved collecting. I loved accumulating stuff, but it wasn't stamps specifically until I got to college. I was studying history, and stamps just struck me as sort of a, the way I thought of it at the time. It was small physically, and it was affordable to start, both of which you very quickly learn are not necessarily true as your collection grows and takes over more and more of your life. But I was about 19 years old. From what I remember, this is sort of a weird tangent, but the first time I ever bought postage stamps, I'd had my wisdom teeth removed, and I was laying at home very hopped up on, whatever they give you to knock your teeth out. And I had so many interests historically that somehow I ended up on eBay and started looking at postage stamps. And apparently I ordered a set of the 1935 Imperf National Parks, a cheap used set for, a couple of pennies or whatever. A couple of days later, they arrived in the mail, and I had no real recollection of having ordered them. But I loved them. I was fascinated by them. I was obsessed with them. And I thought, you know what, even though I wasn't necessarily conscious when I bought these, maybe it's something I can stick with. So that was sort of my entry point. I went, bought a cheap album. I was living in a fraternity house at the time. I was the sort of the freak show that all of my brothers would apologize for, because I'm the one sitting there on a Friday or Saturday night hinging stamps into an album instead of partaking in what I guess normal college students partake in. But that's really how I sort of cut my teeth and got interested. From there, like Michael, I Googled, what does a young person do to become more involved? Found the YPLF, got in touch with Alex. And my first APS show was the year after Michael's. I went to Hartford 2014. At the time, more than anything, it was just exciting. I loved to travel. And as a college student, didn't have too many opportunities. So the fact that they were willing to fly you around the country and let you meet people who might be like-minded was really, really exciting to me. So I went to Hartford 2014, met quite a few of the YPLF fellows there, and from that point on was just really bitten by the bug and really passionate. But I still had no plans of transitioning from a hobby into a full-time career. I was studying history and geology, and I wanted stamps to stay a hobby because I feel like more often than not, when you turn a hobby into a job, it stops being fun and stops feeling like a hobby. So through the YPLF, I was invited to attend Monaco Phil 2016, which is the big semi-annual international show in Monaco. I received a letter in the mail that said, your free trip to Monaco. And, like so much spam we receive, I threw it away. And it was only through conversations with my friends that they said, are you going to Monaco with us? And I said, no, I threw that piece of junk mail out long ago. And luckily was able to get another copy of the application. So I went to Monaco Phil 2016, which is my first international show, my first big stamp trip. And while I was there, Alex got me into this mess as a YPLF fellow. And while I was there, he grabs me. He says, there are a couple of gentlemen who run an auction house in Germany. They have an American branch. They want somebody to move to Germany for 2 months to intern with them. And I said, this whole thing, going to Monaco in the first place feels like a dream. I'm pinching myself. And then being told that somebody wants me to move to Germany to work for a stamp auction house for 2 months, I felt like, Ashton Kutcher was going to jump out at any minute and tell me it was all a joke. But I moved to Germany for 2 months. Coincidentally, they had an American branch of the auction house, which was just about 15 minutes from where I was born and raised. So while I'm in Germany, I had to fly all the way from California to Germany to get a job back in California. I had to travel, 10,000 miles or whatever to get a job down the road. And they told me that they wanted me to work full-time at H.R. Harmer, which is one of America's older, well-established auction houses. I started working there. That was right before the New York, Monaco Phil was 2015, because I started working there right before the international show, New York 2016. So I got to attend that show. And, from there, it's just been a really fun ride. I just celebrated 4.5 or so years with the company. The company moved to Midtown Manhattan about 1.5 years ago. So I'm no longer in California. I helped facilitate the move of H.R. Harmer back to New York City, where we were founded in 1940. And that's sort of the, in a nutshell, my philatelic journey from not knowing what a stamp was, only about 6 or 7 years ago, all the way to where I am now in an office in Rockefeller Center. Has been a real whirlwind. And Like Michael, I want to give all credit to Alex and the APS and the YPLF in particular for making this whole wild ride a reality.
That is some serendipity.
I just kept saying yes to opportunities that came up, and things kept working out the right way, it seems. So yeah, it all feels very serendipitous. It all feels like I just fell into this somehow.
And I mean, that it was during as you were convalescing from your wisdom teeth and you just found yourself on eBay.
Accidentally, yeah.
Holy cow, what a great story. Geez, thank you so much. And congratulations on the move back. And that's beautiful that you guys got to go back to your roots in New York and that you're in Rockefeller Center. I mean, wow, dreams can come true and all through stamps.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
So thank you again for inviting me on, Heidi.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And thank you for producing the podcast, guys. You can visit stamps.org where you will find each episode as they are unrolled in our newsroom. So check it out, Conversations with Philatelists. Thanks, Charles. That was incredible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jennifer Gagliardi is up next. And while she starts to share her screen, I met Jennifer on Twitter, probably just like most of these folks that you're seeing here. And Jennifer has been a Stamp Chat presenter. She teaches, she uses stamps in her US citizen classes, and just found out through our webmaster the other day, her Stamp Chat is second only to Patrick Massalis' Stamp Chat in its number of views. So clearly you're doing something that is very popular and is entertaining and tickles people's funny bones. So without further ado, Jennifer Gagliardi joins us from San Jose, California. You muted, Jennifer?
Hi, hello. I'm from San Jose, and it was really, when I was growing up here, it was nothing but orchards. But the big things that were happening for me, went to Catholic school. Star Trek was the original show was on the air, and the American Revolution was really, these were the three big influences when I was growing up. So moving from there, I didn't collect stamps as a younger person, but I got into stamp collecting when I went to Beijing for the UN Women's Conference. I was there for computer support, and while they were there, they had the UN, of course, had their postal service there, issued a really amazing set of stamps, which I bought. And when I came back from Beijing, I joined the stamp club ring, and I started collecting and posting stamps related to feminist issues, particularly the breast cancer stamp had come out at that time. There were more and more stamps coming out to celebrate women's history. And also I really love rabbit stamps. And at the similar time, the United States Postal Service started issuing stamps related to the Lunar New Year. So, of course, they put out a series of related to rabbits. I got them. I started adding more, and just stamps just like rabbits started multiplying in my life. So, anyway, moving on from there, eventually I moved, for many years I was in Silicon Valley as a computer operator, but I did eventually move to adult education, and I started incorporating stamps and as realia when I would teach citizenship and civics. So here would be an example of one of the questions we would ask in citizenship: name one of the 2 longest rivers in the United States. And the point is not only to get my students to focus in on the answers, but basically enable them to start remembering the questions and understanding the questions and associating them with the stamps. So here, of course, we have the Great River Road celebrating the Mississippi, but it's also a flyway. And one of the things that my students have have talked about over the years is they really miss the birds from their own country. So when I talked about the Mississippi River, yes, it's good for commerce, but it's home to so many birds, and that's how they navigate back and forth from their winter to summer homes. They really started, that was the thing that really sold it. And so I started incorporating more and more postage stamps into my teaching. And particularly in 2008, I did a blog post about stamps and how the stamps reflected our religious diversity, particularly not only in Milpitas, but also in the United States. And over the years, they've incorporated, I used to think it's a big deal. We have Christmas, we have the secular Christmas, we have the religious Christmas. They started bringing in Kwanzaa, Hanukkah. Now they've extended out to Diwali, and also they're doing things in Lunar New Year. I created a PDF of that, and in 2020, I basically prepared a larger PDF, and I wrote it also in English and in Spanish because I wanted to, again, as part of an outreach to our community. From there, I started also making videos with stamps. So for instance, as I was teaching certain aspects of citizenship, I would usually use stamps as the background so people could see the stamp, listen to what I'm talking about, and basically it's a way to take in civics content in a more enjoyable style. This one here, particularly the Go Green series, a lot of people kind of didn't like this series because of the naive art, but as an ESL teacher, this was a really amazing series because our students do these things naturally, but they don't have the English for this. So this was a way for us to practice a lot of verbs and things that were not new to them, which were newer for American citizens. They have been doing these things all their life. Now they had the English for them, and they're seeing their daily activities celebrated on stamps. Most importantly, it's easy to use stamps to teach the civics aspect of citizenship. But a little bit more difficult is to teach the N400. And the N400 is the application for naturalization for U.S. citizens. So one of the things that I've really focused in on my career as a citizenship teacher is building out that meeting for the citizenship students, particularly focusing on the N400 because that's a really rich source of of their own personal lives. It's a snapshot of their personal life. So one of the questions here is, have you ever voted or registered to vote? And I think this is one of the most loveliest stamps, vintage stamps, registered to vote. Of course, this stamp here for celebrating the Voting Rights Act and that series that it came from was really, really important, really powerful stamp, and I've used that stamp series several times in my class to talk about the history of civil rights, particularly the right to vote. And just the other day, I swear, yes, Wednesday was my birthday. I finally received Women Vote, the 19th Amendment stamp. They had been totally sold out of my in San Jose and in our local Bay Area. Couldn't find them anywhere. One of my friends had actually bought a sheet for them and gifted them to me on my birthday. So I finally got the Women Vote stamp, which I was so excited about. One of the ways that we can use our stamps, and I think Hamid reference this, is we can flex our power by using vintage stamps. So the election is coming up. I'm writing a lot of postcards, and I am using vintage stamps and really bought some really nice postcards, and basically writing postcards on behalf of my favorite candidates. So we're using stamps to basically flex our power as citizens and getting out that vote. And one of the ways that I extend the fun is that I've done a lot of jigsaw puzzles with that celebrate stamps. And I was really excited personally when I brought this one in from the Smithsonian, which I had picked up at the Postal Museum in Washington, D.C. And this is a series of, well, it's a map of the United States with all these different vintage stamps incorporated into it. When I showed it to my students, they were like, we don't care. It's kind of like they don't really kind of know what's going on with the stamps. However, it finally occurred to me, I'm basically having their fun. Maybe I should give them the puzzles and they can start putting the puzzles together and then asking questions from that. So I've been using puzzles with stamps on them. So our students are getting more interested, and they've actually brought in some of their own stamps to share in the fun themselves. And we also do online stamp puzzles with stamps. And then finally, I want to encourage people to pass on the fun. This is a picture from one of my fellow teachers who inherited this from one of his male relatives, but he really doesn't know anything about it. So like the previous map of the stamps here are basically a lot of those same stamps, but they're put into a really interesting display of stamps, and he didn't really know anything about that. So I'm encouraging to join APS and basically to learn more about not only the heritage of the United States, but his own family heritage as well. I just want to encourage people to stay home, stay healthy and strong, and that's it for me. So thank you so much.
Incredible. Yeah, I mean, each story, I'm taking notes, friends, of, you know, when I wrap it up to put it into a story at some point. I'm just so thankful that we launched this, and each and every one of you has come on to share. It's so unique, each and every entry point. Happy birthday, Jennifer. And I'm so happy that you were able to get your suffrage stamps. And as Casey Joe said in the chat, we did have a fabulous presentation at the virtual stamp show from the artist of those stamps. So if you haven't had a chance to check that out, it is on stamps.org in classroom C3A. So
I have a question about that.
Sure.
I think I'm supposed to be scheduled to talk about voting rights on stamps coming up later in October. Is that correct?
You are. October 29th you are scheduled to join us. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm going to be talking about stamps not only from the United States, but from other countries that celebrate the right to vote, and some of the people who advocated for the right to vote. So I'm super excited about that. Thank you.
And we're so excited to have you come and join us again, Jennifer. And just as you were mentioning and showing us all those postcards that you were sending, well, that's such a great segue to introduce our next Philatelic guest, Daniel Kurtz, joining us from Middlesex, New Jersey. Again, Daniel's also been a Stamp Chat presenter, talking about the postal history of Australia and how that impacted transportation. He really is able to synthesize so many different subjects within the framework of philately. It's mind-blowing. I love when we get a chance to talk. And Daniel is a huge proponent of writing letters and the power of the pen. Without further ado, I'm going to let you talk about that, Daniel. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I did mute Daniel, so it makes it a little more
okay. I'm sorry. Okay, hi, how are you? Good Good afternoon from a very rainy South Brunswick, New Jersey. I really love stamps, and I love all aspects of communication and letter writing. And I first became really interested in stamps when I was younger. Like a lot of people in the tri-state area, you know, I've been to New York City, and one of the buildings that always really struck me is the Farley Post Office, which is across the street from Madison Square Garden, which is this huge marble colonnade of gigantic neoclassic, Roman-style columns. It looks absolutely, I mean, it looks historic, magisterial. And I remember as a young man or a young boy, realizing that there was some kind of governmental priority here. Obviously, if the government was going to take the time to create such a magnificent, artifact of that architecture. So when I was younger, I was always very, very interested in these post offices, and wherever I went, whenever I went to a new city or whatever, I would always go out of my way to, find the general post office or the main post office in the city. And it very rarely disappointed me, whether it's in Boston or Newport or even Morristown, New Jersey, always like, lavish uses of, of marble and, either Art Deco or neoclassical architecture. And it just really began to make me curious about connectivity and the power of letter writing, because letters are so powerful, and in many respects, they form some of the best documents that we have from, history about, what's going on in people's heads, and, what are they talking to each other, and how different ideas are floating around. So as a young man, by the time I was in high school, I had a lot of respect for letters and letter writing. And I would begin to, do things like write letters to the editor, write letters to politicians, write letters to family members. And I always noticed the tremendous impact it would have for most of the people who had received my letters, regardless of whatever the subject matter, So it really attracted me to the idea of stamps, and as kind of like publications for good. As history teachers, we're always taught it's not really proper to spend a lot of time in class talking about good and evil, which is true. You shouldn't. Life is filled with gray, and we need to understand the complexities of the way that human beings deal with each other. But there are exceptions, and one of the exceptions is really stamps. And stamps, from really the very beginning, from the development by the 40s, is really just to connect people and to allow people to organize and allow people to have a voice and for themselves, whether they're trying to get the vote, or they're trying to get a raise, or they're trying to convince someone to marry them. The role of letters in history is something which is awesome, with a capital A. For example, I'll give you an example right now, which is the pandemic. And, of course, we're seeing tons and tons of post-apocalyptic movies, right? We're seeing all these kind of apocalyptic themes and movies. Well, actually, the idea of the apocalypse, the book of Revelation, isn't a book at all. It's a letter. It's a letter that is written by a person on an isolated Greek island to the rest of the world about how he thinks the world is going to end. And it's just really a few pages, and it has shaken society to its very foundations to this day. When you look at the Christian Bible, and you look at the letters of Paul, and you look at all these missives and epistles that are going out, that people have read about and agonized over in history, it's really an awesome thing. And also, what I'm interested in too is how people use letters to kind of cry out in the wilderness. And sometimes this manifests itself on a really, really large scale. And a good example of that is looking at the postal history and the philatelic history of Hong Kong. Hong Kong was a British colony that was established on the peripheral of China. And it had this kind of it kind of had this like delicate relationship with its British homeland. So what you see is, you see in the history of the postal service and stamp design are these incredibly beautiful, intricate stamps that that have permeated throughout the history of the colony, and it's just tremendous to see. So I'm just someone who really just loves letters, and I love the history of postal services and how letters have united us throughout history, and how they've just created a record of our own humanity. And what's interesting too about postal history is I'm interested in kind of three phases of it. The first phase is when there were no post offices. What did people do? How did they communicate with each other personally? Then, of course, we have modern postal history, which really begins in the 1830s and 40s with the British and the idea of a single stamp market. And then we have, the birth of email and electronic mail, really, which begins to manifest itself in the late 1990s, which has taken on a life of its own. I mean, right now in the news, this whole idea where, Rudy Giuliani has found these emails, about Hunter Biden. I'm not going to discuss my opinion of them, but the idea that we're dealing with letters, we're dealing with letters, right? Oh my goodness, we've got to get to the bottom of these letters. Who wrote them? Are they real? Were they forged? So you have all these people who are poring over these missives, So I just find it to be endlessly fascinating and attractive and very, very powerful. And I'm just going to, just conclude by saying that right now with my students in my Western Civ course, we're talking about the Reformation. And the Reformation was literally kicked off by a Catholic priest named, of course, Martin Luther, who read a letter. He read Paul's letter to the Romans, and he took an interpretation of it that no one ever had before, and it changed everything. I'm not saying whether he had a correct interpretation. That's not my point. My point is that he some of the most moving things that Martin Luther has to say is how he felt Paul was talking to him through the letters. So in a way, letters almost have almost like a supernatural premise to them. They're like little spirits, in a way. So yeah, so that's what really attracted me to stamp collecting and whatnot. And I love stamps. Stamps are great. They're amazing small documents. Governments make lots and lots of products. Some are beautiful like stamps. Some are mixed like money. Right? There's this whole kind of study of money and monetary design. And of course, governments design weapons and, which of course, kill people. So it's just really amazing when you look at, all these different attributes that come from government and how they're used in different ways. So thanks.
Just gorgeous. It just goes to show you that there are pathways into this hobby, and letters are so powerful, and how you ended on with the Martin Luther story. I mean, and that they're like spiritual beings. I'm a letter writer. That's how I got into the hobby. And so I fully concur. I mean, at 8 years old, I was writing to Duracell and Energizer and NASA, and, always got a real kick out of it. But thank you for that. There's passion every time you talk about postal history. So thank you so much for joining us. And in terms of postal history and covers, that's such a nice way to introduce. And I see her smiling already. Dani Leviss. She is another YPLFer, a graduate. And if anybody was, well, actually, I posted her cover on all of our social media yesterday. It's adorable. It was from age 4, and I'll let Dani go ahead and tell her stamp story. She's a cachet maker. So, and if you would be so kind and to even explain what cachets are for any of our friends that might not know it.
Okay, so let me share my screen. Okay. Like Heidi mentioned, I'm a cachet maker. I started out as a first aid cover collector. I went to my first stamp show when I was probably, well, AmeriCover, the big show for first day covers when I was 9 months old in Irvine, California. I've known about stamps, I've known about covers since I was born. My dad was a cover dealer and a collector himself, so I just grew up in the hobby. So these covers here on my first slide, they're covers from my collection. I started out collecting, of course, like childhood interests like Sesame Street and Tigers. And as I've grown up, I've found other interests to collect on covers. I went to Drew University for my undergrad, and the unofficial mascot or animal is the squirrel. So I now collect squirrels in my collection. I'm also really interested in covers and stamps that celebrate famous women. And this is a cover by my friend Don Neal for the Oscar de la Renta stamp, and Rihanna, who's wearing a dress similar to the fabric that's on the stamp. But like I mentioned, I came into collecting through my family. My dad was a stamp collector from childhood, and then as an adult he was a cover dealer, Barry and Jerry First Day Covers. And what's really cool, when I joined YPLF, Scott was able to find my dad's and my grandfather's membership applications from way back in the 70s. And so what's really cool with my origin story with stamp collecting or first day cover collecting is that it's always been a thing with my that I've come to with my family and been a family thing. But joining the wider community of collectors out there has given me like more pieces of my family history back. Like I had never seen my grandfather's signature on anything, and through a copy of the membership application, I was able to see it and find out that it was my dad who referred his father to join the APS. So that's really cool. So these are some of my early first day covers. I started around 4 years old, just goofing around with envelopes at home. These aren't like real, they don't have postmarks or anything, but there's stamps, there's cachets, that's the artwork that goes on the envelope. And something that's kind of really struck, continued through as I've grown up is covers to me are all about the artwork. The artwork on the stamp, the artwork on the cover. I'm drawn to a lot of color, I'm drawn to design, and that goes into my own covers. I like to use a lot of color. The top left, that's the Cherry Blossom Centennial. That's the first cover I designed under my cachet line, BGC Legacy, which is a continuation of my father's line. These are some of my favorites here: Jimi Hendrix, Sally Ride, Mr. Rogers. So I love making art, and I think it's really cool to connect history and culture through the stamps and through the artwork and share that with other people. And through YPLF, kind of like Michael and Charles, that's when I first found like friends that were my age in stamp collecting, where I could not have to explain what a stamp is, what a postmark is, what a first day cover is, and I was able to talk with people my own age and become friends. And so through that program, I was in the first designer track with my mentor, Chris Calley, and I designed a few covers and even some postmarks for the American First Day Cover Society, which was super exciting. And it's covers and stamps for me, like I've said before, it's all about the artwork and the design. And I think it's really cool within stamp collecting and cover collecting that you can come in from so many different interests. You could be really interested in a certain topic, and then this is another way to collect things about that topic. Or like me, you can be really into art and images and find things that way. And I started the stamp story that I came to Philately with my family, and it's only grown so much more with friends and Philately. So on the left, that's the fellows in my YPLF class, and then the bottom right, though, that's my mentor Chris Calley, my mom Donna, and my friend Don Neal. So it's still family, it's just a lot bigger now. So that's my story.
Oh, Danny, that's a beautiful story, and I love that we were able to feature cachet making. I don't know, for all of our friends that'll be watching this on YouTube, we have another cachet maker that's in the audience, Nurli Kundu, and he's saying what a nice fella your father was or is, Danny, and also we have another participant who'd be interested. Can we buy your covers?
Yeah. I do sell my covers. I'm working on getting them online. In the past, we've just done shows, and so that's not happening right now, but hopefully soon I'll be selling online.
Wonderful. Well, we can't wait. That snuffy one with the big bird, that be still my heart.
That's one my dad made.
Oh, it's absolutely beautiful. The Mr. Rogers, I mean, the Markophily, I love how you were able to capture those as well. The postmarks are just dynamite. Our next guest, thank you so much, Danny, is Ken Martin. Ken Martin is my coworker. He is the Shell answer man. He is the person that everybody here at the APS calls, knows his line. Ken Martin is the Director of Expertizing. He was he was the Director of Membership, and now he's gone into Expertizing, which is the authenticity, or the making sure of the authenticity of a stamp. And he is a diehard, and I can't wait to hear Ken's story. Welcome. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule, Ken.
Thanks, Heidi. I'm glad to be here. I guess mine, I'm a little bit different than some people. I did start relatively young, but nobody in my family, no relatives that I'm aware of, were stamp collectors. Actually, a couple friends brought some stamps into school toward the end of 5th grade. Got me hooked, I believe, convinced my parents to get me an album for my 11th birthday, and got started. I think part of what kept me with stamp collecting was I moved quite a bit, was in something like 10 different schools between 1st and 12th grade, as my dad seemed to like switching jobs and moving much more frequently than I would have liked. And stamp collecting was the one thing that I could depend upon, I think, or, that was always there, even when I was going to a new community. While none of my relatives were stamp collectors, I have to say they were very supportive. My grandfather would save every piece of mail, would cut out the corners, save all the stamps for me. I had an aunt and uncle who were missionaries. So they lived in, two cousins were born in Nigeria. They lived in England. They lived in Kenya. They were in Rhodesia when it became Zimbabwe. They were in Swaziland. So that they also saved all the stamps that they got on all their mail. From many different countries for me, so that helped as well. I would have joined the APS when I was living in Pensacola, Florida, when I was about 15. Really never met another stamp collector at that point in time, other than the 2 friends that introduced me towards the end of 5th grade. Moved to, actually, earlier on, I was actually lived in southern New Jersey, within a half mile of the Philadelphia International Show in 1976, which was about a year after I started collecting, but I had no idea that was going on, so I missed that show. I moved to Pennsylvania at the end of my junior year of high school, yes, that would be right. When I was applying for college, I knew the APS was in State College. I knew that Penn State, at least then, was relatively affordable. So that became part of the reason, or an added bonus or incentive for applying to Penn State. And which is where I went for undergrad and graduate school. I actually attended the APS summer seminar the summer before starting at Penn State. And while attending that, I asked about volunteering and what was the brand new APS building, previous building to where we are now at that point in time. So when I started at Penn State, I did volunteer work in the library Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, rode my bike about 3 miles from campus because I didn't have a car, to the APS. I also had corresponded, again, not knowing any collectors, I subscribed to Lynn's and Stamp Collector, and I believe Stamp Show News and Philatelic Review, which was no longer been published for a long time. But at some point in time, I wrote to John Dunn, who's currently the publisher of McKeel's Stamps. At that point, he was Education Director for the Philatelic Foundation, asked about stamp clubs at universities. I believe he said he didn't know of any at that point in time. So I started the Penn State Stamp Club. I had a stamp club on campus through my undergraduate years. It kind of faded out when I became a grad student, as I didn't have time to basically do everything, or nearly everything. At one point in time, we got the Penn State Alumni Association. All their mail was being donated to the Penn State Stamp Club for our members. That helped. One of the things that was happening around that time, this would have been 82, 83, was implementation of barcodes on mail. So that was one thing that I looked at. The early barcodes were not very good. Technology wasn't there yet. So a lot of different errors and misdirected mail on early barcodes, but that was something where, you didn't have to pay anything. I was a college student, did not have a lot of extra funds. So that was one thing I did. I also, just before starting at Penn State, would have joined the Junior Philatelist of America, the JPA. Unfortunately, doesn't exist any longer. And just after I started at Penn State, I volunteered to be their stamp identification director. Worked well because when I was going to the APS to do volunteer work, I could also do some research to try to figure out stamps for people, where they were from and so forth. And then I think I was appointed second vice president of the JPA, and the first vice president resigned. I became first vice president. And like a year after I became second vice president, I believe I became president of the JPA. So I was actually president of the JPA just at the end of my term, around the time of Ameripex, the 1986 International Stamp Show. So I skipped my college graduation basically and went out and helped with that for 14 days from the first day of setup until basically the end of that. And things have just, I've tried to combine some of my stamp collecting interest with other interests. So the first exhibit I did was related to blood donation, as I've been involved with donating blood myself and helping to collect blood with the Red Cross. So that's a quick story.
Thank you, Ken. I had not heard your stamp story, and but rumor had it about your graduation. I didn't realize that it was Ameripex. So, and in Penn State, and how long you've been connected with the American Philatelic Society. And for when the APC opens up, I hope that everyone will come join us here in Bellefonte, and you'll meet Ken. Ken is the mayor of our organization. So thank you so much for your time, and I'm just tickled to have been able to hear your story. Thank you. And as we round out our premiere of Stamp Stories, I'd like to introduce, without further ado, there's Casey Jo White, who joins us. She is a frequent stamp chatter. She's able to make a profession out of it. She's very active on Twitter and on Instagram, and she has a YouTube channel. And I'll be curious to hear how Casey Jo came into the hobby. Welcome and thank you.
Hello. So my name is Casey Jo White. I go by Casey or Casey Jo or CJ, and I did not collect stamps as a kid. I grew up on a farm, and I liked to walk and to draw and to play with animals. And I went to college for I went to college originally for journalism. I ended up switching my major to English because it gave me a little more freedom in what I could write. So I studied how to write everything, poetry, screenplays, essays, and also journalism. I graduated, I worked a couple different jobs. I worked in radio, I worked as a a substitute teacher. And eventually I ended up taking a job with my boss. His name is Mike. After about 2 years of working with him, he came to me and said, hey, I know that besides writing, you can do some design stuff. Well, I have been getting back into stamp collecting, and a lot of the stamps that I collect are these back of the book stamps that don't have albums for them. So can you make some custom albums for me? I wanted to explain the history of these stamps and then have a space for me to put the stamps at. So I started making those stamp albums for him, and that eventually ended up being my full-time job, is just managing his stamp collection. And it has been great. I really enjoy the stamps. I really enjoy everything I have learned working with these stamps, working with his philatelic library, and making albums. And besides making albums, I also make exhibits for him and for another gentleman, and that has been a thrill. I still remember my boss is somewhat of a mentor to me for my personal stamp collecting. He actually paid for my first membership to the American Philatelic Society, and he's taken me to so many stamp shows I have got to experience. I had never been to the West Coast of the United States, and I went to Westpex, and that was great. And I have loved getting to travel, getting to go to stamp shows, getting to see exhibits and read and learn more about stamps. I made my first non-competitive exhibit for myself for the virtual stamp show, and I can't wait to for stamp shows to open up again so I can make another real personal collection, real personal exhibit. I would eventually like to become a judge of philatelic exhibits, but you have to be able to win vermeil first, or large vermeil first. So I have to accomplish that so I can become a judge and get to really read and dive into these other exhibits that people make. My first stamp show was IndiePex, I think 2015, and then my first big show was in Atlanta in 2016. I got to make my first day cover, which I don't think I have here, unfortunately. But I do enjoy, for my personal collection, making first day covers. I like the artistry and the thought that I get to put behind that. I like hearing from other people what they enjoy. I enjoy writing, researching and writing. Some of the first things that my boss asked me to make albums for were local post stamps. And that has been so much fun to get to really dive in, because some of the local post, it's history that people haven't always delved into before, or when they haven't had access to the materials that we have access to now online. So you can find new things and you can discover, and it's really kind of an adventure. And I like adventure. I like games a whole lot. Prior to being a stamp collector, I didn't collect stamps, but I did have at least 2 D&D characters who were mailmen. That was their impetus for adventuring, was delivering things. So it's amazing to get to be part of this as a career, because I feel like, and in sharing these things with people, that people enjoy it and that I enjoy it. Kind of rambled a little bit there, but that's short and sweet, basically it. I run the Twitter account called Philately Things. That started because I was tweeting on my personal account about stamps, just kind of fun facts that I would find. And I noticed that some stamp collectors were following me, and I thought these people probably don't want to hear my opinions on pop music and anime, so I'll make a specifically stamp account, and it's been really fun to run that. To just every once in a while I'll see something in the collection here that, you know, I might have tasked 100 times, but I see it again and I think, hey, someone might enjoy this. So, you know, I'll snap a picture of it and I'll share it with some information. And I've been writing things on the side for the APS and for the Carriers and Local Society. And I hope you enjoy reading the things I write, because I really like writing them. And that's about it.
And I love that your D&D characters were the postal. That's so cute. And CJ is always my go-to gal. She hosted an ice cream social, and no less, there was ice cream with prizes and everything during our virtual stamp show. And we're really excited to push the envelope, no pun, once again, not only just through Stamp Stories, but we're launching Philatelic Feud. So that's kind of a trivia on Stamp Chat. We're gonna debut that next Thursday at 6:30 p.m. So I hope that you'll join CJ for our Philatelic Feud. There will be prizes. Thank you everyone so much for sharing your personal stamp story. I mean, not one of you has come from the same place. I took notes, like I was saying earlier, of all the different origin points, and it's just fascinating. And I've said it before and I'll say it again, there's a stamp for everyone. In Philately, you really can, it's kind of like a plug, and everybody's got an outlet, kind of like the cancellation mark that you shared on Twitter, Terry, with the markophily of the outlet. I mean, really, we can plug everyone into this hobby. There's something for everyone. It's therapeutic. There's the communication aspect of it. There's the dealer side of it, which was really fun to listen to today. The art aspect, the family, the legacy, when you're bouncing around and kind of like an army brat, having that one collection that keeps you grounded. It's just a fascinating hobby, and I really appreciate each and every one of you for coming on today, and more importantly, for everything that you do for the hobby. Each of you is on social media, and I really, I can't say enough about that, particularly during the pandemic, how important that is. And there's nothing short of a quantum leap that this hobby has taken in 6 months, you know, from a strictly analog hobby to something that's embracing and really being so graceful with the digital aspect of society and the way we're leaning. Thanks, everyone. I'd like to hear your stamp story. So if you'd like to contribute and be on Stamp Chat, Stamp Stories, please send me an email at heidi@stamps.org. Next week, we will have our second episode of Stamp Stories, and then we'll continue with a once a month. I appreciate all of our attendees who have listened to the stories. If we weren't able to get to your questions, which obviously we weren't, and you're just burning to get them, remember you can email me, or on YouTube after we post, please feel free to use the comments. And you can find all of our friends on social media. So look on Twitter. Twitter is probably the most robust philatelic stream. So again, thank you so much. Happy National Stamp Collecting Month to each and every one of you, and for your membership with the APS and your support of. Remember, it's the 2020 challenge. It's 2,000 new members, and you guys are our best recruiters. So we really appreciate it. Let's make this happen. Win a lifetime membership to the APS. Why wouldn't you? Listening to all of these great stories about the benefits of philately. We'll see you soon on Stamp Chat. Thank you so much, everybody. Really appreciate it. Have a great weekend. Thank you.